A warm welcome to you all. Greetings from my home in Yakandanda, some 3.5 hours drive north of Melbourne in Australia. My name is Mark Silver, and I am the co-coordinator of the Swinburne Wellbeing Clinic for older adults. But first, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we strive, the peoples of the rivers and the hills of the Goulburn Valley region where I live, who worked these lands for generations and walked them. We pay our respects to the elders of the past and the speakers of the first words who lived in harmony with this country. We acknowledge the elders of the present who seek to regain their culture and to teach the elders of the future their law, their history, and their language. We pay our respects to them and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. We honour their spirit and their memory, culture, art, and science of the world's oldest living culture through 60,000 years. We treasure and respect their stories and songline traditions. Today, you will hear from 3 speakers coming together from different parts of the world to speak with you about story work and healthy aging, and how story work can contribute to well-being, create social capital, influence policy, and change behaviour. This symposium highlights the role that story work can play within the United Nations proposed decade of healthy aging. It can help provide a strong voice, can contribute to the fight against ageism. It can also emphasize the need for dignity, meaning, and interconnection within an age-friendly society. Story work can also influence policymakers more effectively through feedback and co-design. This symposium brings together the work of these individuals, 3 of them. Each has taken an innovative approach to working with a strong commitment to social justice, dignity, rights, and inequality, and has provided those marginalised with a voice to be heard. Firstly, you will hear from Tony Sumner from Cambridge. He will discuss his work and his partner Pip Hardy's work at Patient Voices. They have done digital story work within different levels of the National Health Scheme, assisting with mutual understanding and giving voice to those with a lived experience of medical and related disabilities. Patient Voices have demonstrated how digital storytelling can be creatively and effectively used to influence policy. Tony's presentation is entitled Valuing People, Honouring Their Lives and Hearing Their Stories. Next, we will hear from Zanti Galenko. She will discuss the intergenerational dimensions to story work. Zanti has been working with life stories. Together with Mark Silver, their intergenerational digital storytelling work has demonstrated that bringing older and younger people together can build stronger relationships and identities, foster greater understanding between the generations, and break down stereotypes about ageism, dementia, and mental health, and building community connection and building and belonging through a mutual lifelong learning approach. So we will hear from them all, one after the other, and we will have some questions at the end of the presentation and some discussion. So thank you very much.
Hello, and thank you for coming. I'm Tony Sumner, co-founder with Dr. Pip Hardy of the Patient Voices Programme and a research associate at Loughborough University Storytelling Academy. The Patient Voices Programme has, for 2 decades, facilitated citizens in creating reflective digital stories of their lived experience of health and social care. Our aim was to provide a process through which the voices of all could tell and share their stories. We've done this across the globe and with over 1,000 storytellers so far. During those two decades, the programme has come to realise not only the value of the digital stories produced as reusable learning objects, educating and influencing health and social care staff and policymakers, but also the beneficial effects of the reflective process on the lived experiences of digital storytellers. What are digital stories? What is digital storytelling? Digital stories are short first-person videos consisting of still images, a voiceover, music and video, created by ordinary people about things that really matter to them. Digital stories are a distillation. They move us from a narrative to an essential story. All storytellers are different, and not all patient voices storytelling workshops start as expected. After the first session of workshop, Eva, an 82-year-old nun, tiny but frail and with the formidable nature of someone who has spent decades working with drug users and trafficked women, said, "Well, I rather think I've been sent here on false pretenses." We chatted in the garden and she agreed to join the rest of the morning sessions on the promise of a latte during the mid-morning break. But she negotiated hard to get chocolate sprinkles on the top as an extra. By the end of that workshop, she had, however, made her first story, Standing on My Own 2 Feet. Later that year, we worked with more nuns from her community at their retirement home in Yorkshire, a group ranging in age from the 60s to 102. As the group formed a story circle, another nun was added. Sister Josephine, hunched over and unmoving in her chair, the other nuns said that she never spoke or responded, but they always included her in the activities of the community. Because many of the nuns had hearing impairments, we had brought with us a radio microphone and a speaker. The microphone was passed around the circle as the nuns told, in turn, their stories of vocation and calling. Suddenly, as the nun to her left passed the microphone across her to the nun on her right, Sister Josephine sat bolt upright and said, "I want to tell a story." She told the story of a young child who, during the First World War, meets a man she does not recognise. Then she passed the microphone on and slumped back into silence. This is her story, the one she told.
I was born in 1913 and the war began in 1914. And so my father went to war, and when he returned, I wondered who he was. He was in my mother's room with his feet on the sofa, and he called me over and pulled me towards him and told me who he was. And he was amused. It was strange for me to hear that he was my father. We hadn't had my father at the beginning of my life, and it was difficult to discover what was happening. He was only at home for a small spell, and then was called up again. He used to play with us in the garden. He was such a nice man. I can see him now as clear as day in my mother's bedroom. I thought he was such a nice man. He was a nice man, that's all I know about it. He always was a nice man. It's the last day of his life.
After making her first story, Eva came to 3 more workshops over a period of nearly 4 years. Her stories told of her past and her future. Her second story, From Darkness into Light, New Worlds, in 2009, explored the fear she felt about changes she could feel in her mind and the possibility of diagnosis of dementia. And her third story, A Chocolate Watch, made later that year, preserved one of those stories and memories that she did not wish to lose, the story of her escape from Germany on the Kindertransport in the 1930s. A remarkable woman, she came to 1 more workshop in 2011, travelling as ever by herself on the train, twice that time because she forgot and came on the wrong day. In that final workshop, she made The Sun Always Rises, which tells of how she had come to terms with her diagnosis and her future. Over the 18 years we've been practicing digital storytelling, we have had the honour to work with other storytellers with dementia, their carers and their partners. We have learned to innovate and adapt our processes to the particular needs of each storyteller, modifying workshop times and schedules, providing more facilitators and chauffeurs, as one storyteller called them, to drive their computers for them. The stories told and shared have also been of immense value to others working in or using care services and those managing end-of-life care, and they continue to inform and educate. The two most viewed stories on the Patient Voices website are Stripped of Dignity and My Journey with David. They're about dementia and care of the elderly, and those two stories have together now been seen 250,000 times, a fitting tribute to the gift of experience that the storytellers have shared with us. This is the story that Kath has now shared about her dementia with over 130,000 viewers.
How much longer can I do this? I must push myself that extra mile. It's the fatigue, the sleepless nights. Gerald doesn't recognise the night. I have to bathe him and wash him. He can't do it. Can't find the bathroom. I can't take my eye off the ball. I'm exhausted. My only break is when he goes to the day centre. My daughters see that I really do need help. They ring round for advice and I'm offered short-term respite care for Gerald at the right care home. But I've barely begun my break when I get a phone call to come home. My daughter has insisted they call an ambulance. Gerald is at A&E, agitated and confused, doesn't know where he is, hates interference, and the staff don't know how to handle him. This slows everything right down, piles on the stress for me and my daughters, and adds to my husband's distress. At last, a diagnosis. It's cellulitis. Is this causing his confusion? Is it going to make the Alzheimer's worse? 3 weeks on a medical ward, and his one way of expressing himself is to shout out. He is so vocal that they put him in a side ward, though the door is left open. He has one-to-one nursing, but is still left without pyjamas. He keeps throwing the sheet off him in his confusion. I know it's easy for them to clean him without pyjamas, but this strips him of his dignity, literally. Compare this with just 2 weeks previous. In the daycare centre, Gerald is proud of what he can do. They leave the dishes for him because that's a job he is able to do. They know the person and love him to bits. He winds them up and they have a laugh. He knows where he is, has a routine and feels safe. On the ward, even with one-to-one nursing and a This Is Me booklet, there's nothing familiar, and the nurses don't take time to find out about Gerald. Gerald, the husband I loved and cared for over 40 years, died just after we celebrated our ruby wedding anniversary. For everything I've been through, I'd do it all over again. I have to carry on being the voice my husband didn't have. Being the voice that so many other Alzheimer's sufferers don't have. Other people must not go through what we've been through as a family.
Digital storytelling provides the storyteller with the ability to frame their stories in an accessible and distributable manner. Through this digital storytelling process, they can, returning to Sharon again, address the problem of the impermanence of stories. Stories are products of reflection. We do not usually hold on to them long enough to make them objects of reflection in their own right. When we get into the habit of recording our stories, We can look at them again, attend to the meanings we've built into them, and attending as well to our strategies of narrative description. But this is a technical process. How do you make it so that it is an inclusive one and not an exclusive one? The LEADER project, Learning Inclusion in the Digital Age, aims to address the marginalisation of the elderly and all of those on the edges of our society. As Maria Branyas said about the pandemic, the elderly are the forgotten ones in society. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that digital storytelling is not a marginalising force, but an inclusive one. So we can listen and learn. We can provide agile and adaptive facilitation that seeks to empower and not to shape storytellers. We can adapt our processes, our timescales, provide more facilitators, learn best how to include all storytellers. The LEADER project aims to build digital storytelling processes that are flexible and adaptable so that they promote the inclusion of the marginalised, whether they are marginalised by age, economics, health, or language, as active citizens through the ability to create and share their stories so that others can experience them and also attend to the meaning contained within them. Thank you.
My name is Xanthi Golenko, and I'm a research fellow with the Bolton Clark Research Institute. So today I'm going to be talking about intergenerational dimensions of story work. So Bolton Clark is Australia's largest independent not-for-profit provider of at-home support, retirement living and residential aged care. And Swinburne Wellbeing Clinic for older adults provides counselling and support services to older adults in residential care, families and staff, and has set up a national face-to-face telehealth program during COVID. In the spirit of reconciliation, Bolton Clark and Swinburne University acknowledges all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognises their connection to land, sea, culture and community. And we pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So I'm going to talk to you today about two projects. So the first one is called PADSIP, which was started in Melbourne in 2007 by Mark Silver. And so PADSIP stands for Positive Ageing Digital Storytelling Intergenerational Program. Then the second project I'm going to be talking about is titled Creating Intergenerational Connections Through Digital Storytelling. And this second project builds on the first PADSIP project and has started in Brisbane this year, which we're really excited about. Before I jump into the details about the projects, I'm just going to explain a little bit about what we mean by intergenerational digital storytelling. So I'll just break it down. When we talk about intergenerational programs, we've got a definition here. They're considered to be social vehicles that create purposeful and meaningful exchange of resources and learning among older and younger generations. So really, they're all about developing relationships across the generations that are mutually beneficial and improve community connection as a whole. And it's also an opportunity to share talents and resources, knowledge, wisdom, and experience across the generations. When we think about story work, everybody has a story. And story is about learning, celebrating, healing, and remembering. Story work is powerful and it's also empowering, and it can link together with others, with other people, as well as things that they value and give meaning to. So then when we talk about digital storytelling, a digital storytelling is essentially a short first-person video narrative, and it's created by combining voice, images, moving video, and music or other sounds. And digital stories, there are benefits, therapeutic benefits in both the process of creating the digital story as well as the outputs, being able to share that story. Digital storytelling gives people a voice to advocate for change, and it's achievable within limited resources. The technical nature of it really equalizes the mutual learning, and it's creatively versatile and adaptable. That lovely creativity is a really important part of it. And it creates a treasured record that can be shared with a wide audience. So there are several benefits when we think about intergenerational digital storytelling for the participants. So for the older adults, things like increased community participation, benefits in terms of well-being, feeling valued, learning from the younger people and passing on that wisdom and values and culture and traditions to the new generations. For younger people, things like being recognised and valued as contributing to society, opportunities to share their unique talents with the older adults, and also gaining awareness about older people and disability. So that's really important in terms of breaking down ageist attitudes among young people and stereotyping. Also important to develop those relationships that can provide guidance and support and friendship, and also learning about history firsthand from somebody that's lived those experiences. So going back to the projects, the first one is PADZIP. Now, this one started in Melbourne, as I said, in 2007, and there's actually been multiple projects going on over the last 15 years, but generally they involve older people. Many of them are living with disability, and they're from the local area around Melbourne. And the older people are then working with local high school students, and they're from years 7 to 10, so ranging, I guess, from about 12 years to 16 years in age. And the projects essentially involve meeting together and sharing experiences and stories, and then creating a digital story about their experience. So I'm just going to show you a short video which will explain a bit more about the PADZIP program.
Welcome to PADZIP 2021. We are very, very excited to be able to have PADZIP this year. Because of COVID, nothing is certain. On the 15th of July, we had a launch, a face-to-face launch at the school. Little did we know that there was going to be a lockdown the very next day. But what was palpable was the comradeship, the spirit and the atmosphere. There was an excitement. And we were very privileged to have Dawn Trainer with us. Now, Dawn is one of these remarkable people who was there at the beginning of PADZIP. And it was just wonderful to hear her reflection.
The connection you make with the young ones stay with you forever. What you've seen tonight is exactly how it happens.
So the first week was very much an experimental one as we were all on Zoom, really trying to connect. And of course, we had the laugh of misconnection and all the technical problems, but we have to really say that Craig saved the day. This year, we've added a research dimension to PADZIP, led by Leisha Lee. And I asked Leisha what the research involved.
People who have been involved in PADZIP thus far, they've come away speaking about such great outcomes and taking away so much great experiences. So in terms of what we're specifically looking to examine, we want to see the extent to which participants complete the program, are satisfied with the program, and how much they experience improvements in their mood, loneliness, feeling understood, their self-views, and their attitudes towards aging.
I feel very privileged to have had the opportunity to sort of bear witness, if you like, to these two generations coming together. Being in the facility before the first session, the excitement was quite tangible amongst the older adults.
There have been some challenges transitioning to an online platform, but it's been really amazing to see how excited people still are about the program and how resilient people have been with the transition.
I think that it was a really safe space for everyone, that everybody felt that they were being listened to without judgment.
In our group, I guess we were talking about mainly our schooling, and Lorraine taught us about how to get past, I guess, like these times, like in lockdown, and to just get motivation, actually. That's the word. To get motivation to study, I guess. Because she had experience during war times.
I think it is really important because we're part of different generations, and we have different things that we might talk about. different things we might think are important or viewpoints we might have.
I enjoyed being able to talk to different kinds of people, especially older people, because I have family, most of my family is back in England, so my grandparents, and I don't get to talk to them a lot because of that. So it was nice having a talk with some more diverse people.
We spoke a lot in our group about kind of our career aspirations and how now our aspirations are a lot different than the women in the group would have had when they were younger, because the jobs weren't available to them. But now we can kind of just do nearly whatever we want and expect of it, or like have the hope that we will be able to achieve it.
To be perfectly honest, I think the main thing is that women are free, because the women before my generation, they weren't free. They were under control of their parents until they married. After they married, they're under control of their husband. They never really had much freedom to do what they wanted.
It was really cool just like listen to a perspective of somebody who lived such a different lifestyle at our age, and to listen to really fun and interesting stories from years ago.
My mum was a great collector of philosophies and worthwhile thoughts. And she had a great one, and I'd like to leave it with you. Yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope.
So building on this work, we've adapted the program that was conducted in Melbourne, and we're implementing it in Brisbane. And we've actually got 160 Year 7 students from a high school, a local high school, and we've got 25 older adults from a retirement village and also from a grandparents program associated with the school. And we've also got staff from the aged care provider and also from the school that are participating and facilitating the sessions. The program is a 10-week or 10-session program. We have weekly sessions with seniors and students. They come together every Tuesday for an hour and a half. And we're actually alternating between in-person and online meetings. As you know, COVID restrictions start to ease, we're able to bring the groups together face-to-face again, which is wonderful. So sometimes the older adults travel to the school, sometimes the students travel to the retirement village, and sometimes the meetings are held online. And essentially we've got small groups working with individuals, seniors or couples. And the idea is to create a 3-minute digital story which comes out of these meetings together. Could be things about historical changes, ideas for future development, things about making a difference, or just commonalities that they have that they share across the generations. What we've done also with the program, so we've got these 8 steps for creating a digital story. At the centre of that, we have the story circle, which is the group work that we have where people are interacting as a larger group to really create that bond and that sense of belonging to the larger group. Then as they break out and start creating their digital stories in the smaller groups, we have these steps which we've actually integrated with specific session activities, specific topics and prompts. And all of these activities are really designed to create connections between the generations and find commonalities that they can start to develop their digital stories on. So I won't go through this in a lot of detail, but for example, you know, things like when we've got me and my history, the first time I did something, and people can also bring in an artifact or an image and give a short presentation about why that's meaningful to them, or something, it might be something that happened in their life that depicts something that they want to share with the group. So the project is quite structured, and the activities are purposely developed to create that sense of belonging and to enable them to create the digital story by the end of the program. The research component we've got for the students, we're doing pre and post surveys and focus groups, and we're really focusing on looking at changes in attitudes towards ageing and older people. For the older adults, we're doing surveys, pre and post and interviews, and we're looking at psychological and emotional well-being. For staff, we're doing just some follow-up interviews, and it's really about their program experience, so we can develop understanding about how we can improve it and what are the things that work really well and what are some of the things maybe we need to adapt. In terms of the program impact, when we think about digital storytelling, especially intergenerational digital storytelling, the benefits for the schools is we've got this positive effect on student performance. Students really engage in these kinds of programs, and some of the teachers have been astounded at the level of engagement of some of the students. And of course, there's benefits across the whole school community. The school's just buzzing with excitement to find out more about this project. In terms of aged care, successful programs are about enhancing wellbeing. And of course, once we've got it in one aged care site or organisation, it can spread. And in terms of the community, it's really about, encouraging and supporting positive ageing and enhanced cross-generational dialogue, bringing those generations together again. So thank you so much for your time. I will pass over to Tricia, and then we'll have questions at the end. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure whether you can hear us or not. We can only see a few of us in the panel, Zanti and Tony. I hope you enjoyed that and got a bit of a glimpse from Tony and Zanti about some of the work. And please feel free to ask any questions either in the chat at all. We'll be monitoring that. I wanted to first of all mention, unfortunately, one of our team, Tricia Jenkins, couldn't make it today, but I wanted, in the spirit of the conference, because a lot of the conference is about the United Nations Decade of for Older Adults, and I think Tricia was very involved in that, especially around voices of older people. And Tricia provided a technical input into the World Health Organization's work using participatory video, and that enabled meaningful engagement of older people. And that was really important because it cross-cut the 4 priority areas of combating ageism, fostering age-friendly environments, strengthening integrated primary health care and long-term care. And Tricia has worked especially with marginalised older adult voices around the world, providing a means for them to be heard. And I think that's really a nice place to start, because having the global perspective is really where the particular work that Tony and Zanti and I guess myself have been working. You kind of work at the micro level, and you've seen some really beautiful stories that Tony has shown, and some of the work that has been done with individuals. But the impact that it has in terms of combating ageism is quite palpable. And I don't know whether anyone wants to ask any questions about that, but I'm going to ask Tony first of all, because Patient Voices has been going for a long time and has been fostering not only work with marginalised groups and people with lived experience, but also the people that help them and involved in communicating together. Maybe Tony, you could give us a little bit of a glimpse of some of that work with the NHS and how you bring people together.
Yeah, there's a great quote from the novelist Mitch Albom, who talks about all the stories being one. And actually, we feel that the stories of caregivers are almost a reflection of the stories of those who are being cared for. So all of these stories, the story of their relatives, the story of the caregivers, the stories of the clinicians, the stories of the hospital administrators, and the stories of the people themselves. And all of those overlap in this sort of Venn diagram way, I think, at the centre of which is the story. And that story can be different, seen from any one of those viewpoints. One of the things we are striving to do is to give the opportunity for people who are marginalised, whether it's through being refugees, elderly, economically disadvantaged, rurally based, the ability to engage with the system. And so one of the spin-offs from our work in the health service was this work we're trying to do with this learning inclusion in digital age project. But one of the things I think I'd like to roll back, just as I think of it, to that final story I showed, which was Cass Veselovsky's story about how many of the stories. So that is the most watched of the stories from the website so far, and that's been hit probably 135,000 times. There's another story told again by an older person about her husband's journey towards the end of his life with MND. And that is the second most watched story. So the stories of ageing are clearly the stories that people want to see and that people have an appetite to see. And I hope that all of our work, and including Trisha's, because my co-founder Pip Hardy worked on a chapter with Trisha around on a book of the Silver Stories Project, which brought together Trisha's work in participatory video and digital storytelling, and our work in digital storytelling. And I think there are so many ways that we can get a better understanding of people's needs, in this case, specifically the elderly, but also anyone who has needs, who has dreams, who has wishes, who has hopes. And I know that's what you're building in, Xanthi, into your work, building that into the system.
Yeah. Xanthi, can you tell us a bit more about the impact of things on attitudes that you've noticed in terms of changes of attitudes that the young people have in terms of their stereotyping of older adults that you see, and actually the other way around, isn't it, where the older adults also change their views of young people. And we often hear this thing where, it's quite amazing, we're so glad that, the world can be left to these young people because, we didn't know that they were so clever and wise and, there's hearts in the right place. So do you want to comment on that, Xanthi?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's incredible how unfortunate it is that through mainstream media we have often a very, bad impression of or poor impression of the other generation. So younger people seem to have this, not a positive attitude towards older people, whether that's through mainstream media or just anecdotally, and likewise for older people. Sometimes, all they hear about is troubled youth. All you hear about is the bad stuff. You never hear about the good stuff. And so when they actually come together and do a meaningful project together, that's when they sort of have these revelations of, oh, wow, the older people saying, wow, these young people are so amazing. And likewise, the younger people sort of go, oh, older people are actually pretty cool, So I think that's really important to sort of see. And I guess that stereotyping or, negative attitudes towards a different generation is just lack of opportunities to interact and have meaningful interactions, because once you do that, then you do have those positive attitudes towards the older generations. And something that I'd really like to see, in terms of the intergenerational projects, is that it's built into school curriculums and that it's built into care practices, these intergenerational projects where younger people from, preschool age right through to primary school and high school come together with older people at various times to do these sort of projects, because I think that's really going to change the whole way our society perceives the other generation.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And Tony, can you give us a bit more of a glimpse of some of the work that the workshops actually do in terms of the group work? Because I think I guess the question for you, Tony, is why can't it be done individually? Why does it have to be in a group? And why do you have this kind of story circle idea where people learn from each other?
I think that just as the stories are never told in isolation, they're better not created in isolation. And so we find that if you have a group process, a small group process in our case, sort of 6 to 12 people, storytellers, with facilitators helping them to create their stories, then actually you build up something which is more than that which you would get if you simply worked with one person. What comes to mind is one of the stories I alluded to, well, was actually showed, the story made by an elderly nun. This is part of a big workshop with about 12 nuns a while ago now, maybe 10 years ago. And what came out of that was that even though this group of nuns were in a retirement home for nuns in the north of England, members of a Catholic order, they had lived there together for many years in some cases. And yet when they actually started to reflect upon their own stories, in this case, we were trying to help them tell stories of vocation and calling and why they came to this order and what it was as elders in the order. The youngest was 62, 66, the oldest was 102. What were the stories of vocation that they could hand to the next generation of members of the order and potential members of the order? But it was really interesting and fascinating, as it has been in many workshops, watching the correlation about each other's stories. So part of the process is for within the story circle, people to share their idea for their story. And then we invite peer review and peer support and positive comment. But that often, we find in particular in that case, it provided clarification for the storyteller. It provided validation of what they said. It challenged them to define things that they were saying. So the group process produces, I think, something which is very often more than the sum of its parts. And then you find you have a cohort of stories, each individual stories, but they make up one cohort of individual stories. And that I think works. It works very well indeed.
Mm-hmm. Look, thanks a lot. We've got a few questions. Thanks, Carolina. One of them is about publications, and maybe, Tony, you can put some in the chat, some publications that might be useful, just a couple. Yeah. We've got a couple of questions here. We have Gilly Aron from the Netherlands who says that it was a very inspiring presentation and is wondering about tips on how to actually organise storytelling workshops with older people and younger people, especially in terms of recruiting people, because I guess that is a big issue. Zanti, I might throw that one to you if you want to talk a little bit about that. And then there's a couple of other questions as well.
Yeah, look, I think probably, Mark, you might also want to comment on that, because I guess both of us are coming from different perspectives or different, because I actually work for an aged care provider and I work within their research institute. So for us, in terms of recruiting older adults, we will work with one of our care homes and invite residents within those care homes to participate. They are really keen to be part of these types of projects, so we haven't had any issues in terms of recruiting older adults. In terms of the students, we partner with high schools and actually the program is built into their curriculum. But Mark, do you want to explain, because you have a bit of a mixture of we actually use the community contacts. So with older people, we maybe the local council or support groups, or we have some organisation called the University of the Third Age. And sometimes through people that have home care, and so there are organisations that have home care. So we invite people to participate as far as older adults. And with the younger people, we usually pick a school, and the principal usually is very keen
to support the program, and it really builds into the curriculum. So we've learned over the years that it's very easy to build this program into the curriculum, whether it's the IT or the community program or the history, local history. There's quite a lot of tick boxes that can be made in terms of the recruitment. We had another question. I'm going to jump a little bit to about funding. There's a question about funding as well, and from Kayleen Peck, and really, and the funding is really through the community. I know Tony might comment about his funding because he has particular areas of funding that he uses, but we don't get a lot of money. We usually in Australia there are community grants that various local councils have, and we try and apply for those, and that covers a lot of the cost. But there's a lot of in-kind work as well. Do you want to comment quickly, Tony, about the funding?
Yeah, I mean, we find our funding for our work comes from, so we ourselves are unfunded. Funding comes for particular projects. Funding comes typically for our projects from charities, from government health systems, National Health Service trusts, from universities, and a variety of places. Sometimes funding for a project may come from 2 or 3 pots of money. Sometimes it comes from a religious order, very rarely, but sometimes it does. Local councils, essentially organisations that wish to explore, and sometimes government departments, actually, organisations that wish to explore in more depth what the experiences of people are. So to move beyond a statistical survey and a numerical analysis, beyond focus groups and interviews and spines of questions, and into what we sort of regard as uber qualitative data, the ultimate open-ended question, which is, tell me your story.
That's great. No, thanks, Tony. And also, I forgot to mention, we use volunteers and also students, social work students or undergraduate psychology students. I'm part of a wellbeing clinic for older adults, and we train psychologists and social workers. So they're also part of the deal too, and they put in kind support. There's a question here, Zanti, from Audrey Yeo about really for elderly people who are introvert and not very vocal, how do you facilitate getting their discussion, and also the unexperienced student? How do you kind of, I think you're trying to get at, Audrey, about how do you get people who are a bit shy or introverted, or how do they get involved? And, actually, I'm going to quickly answer that because, this program that we have, you won't believe this, but the people that benefit most, and I'm sure Tony agrees too, is the people on the spectrum, the kids on the spectrum, the kids that are a little bit eccentric, or people that have learning issues and don't actually excel in other areas. This is a great way for them to form relationships where otherwise it might be more difficult in the more traditional way. So, Zanti, do you find that too?
Yeah, I guess in terms of the shyer ones, it's been quite incredible to see both the older adults and the students start to come out of their shell. I think initially from both sides there was a level of apprehension among a few people, and I remember we did this letter writing exercise and just to introduce each other, and so there was an older adult working with a very small group of students, and they were reading their letters, and the older adult was really nervous to read her letter out to the students. And so she asked one of the students to read the letter for her. And just that act of, I think, the younger students seeing that older adults get nervous and shy as well made them then feel more safe, I guess, and comfortable. And the whole program initially is really about creating a safe space for people so that they have that psychological safety and feel really, really comfortable with each other. And that does take a couple of sessions, but once they actually start to get to know each other and form those bonds, then they really start to open up, even the really shy ones, and they can really actually benefit from it, from those relationships.
Totally agree about that social, make it a safe social space. One of the things we find is that it's also possible to make it a safe technological space. So Kath Veselovsky was, I think, in her late 70s when she made that story. But in our process, she wrote the script. She recorded her own audio. She chose pictures and she assembled those in Adobe Premiere Pro, a pretty high-end piece of software. But actually, one of the key parts of the process is to help people to use the technology that's there. And what we have found is that even a storyteller who, many years ago, one storyteller came up to me several minutes into typing her story in and she said, Tony, how do I get the spaces between words? So I showed her where the space bar was. She went away, she finished her story. We then took them through, her and the rest of them through just enough technology to make the story. So she went from, in her late 60s, early 70s, she went from not knowing how to use a word processor, to actually using a good piece of complex software to do a task. And she was absolutely made up by the learning from that process. So the digital storytelling process itself, it covers so many basic and key and functional skills: writing, speaking.
Yeah. No. Well, thanks both of you. The next question, sorry, Tony, from Zoe Lim, and she brings up something really interesting because I think a lot of people are thrown by this. She talks about the negative experiences because it's all very good to have the positive experiences, but what happens when people try, and I think what you mean, Zoe, is, people talking about trauma or things that have happened in the past. And, how do you incorporate that? Because I guess it is a therapeutically informed work that we do. And Tony, talking about safe spaces. So, and Zanti, do you want to talk a little bit about that? And I know Tony's got a lot to say also about that. So, Zanti, do you want to start with answering that one?
Yeah, I think, and Mark, you might want to comment on this as well, but I think in an intergenerational space, people adapt, in a trauma-informed approach, people choose what they choose to disclose and how much they choose to disclose about their lives. And I think when you're in an intergenerational space where older adults are working with younger people, then they may not choose to disclose, highly sensitive kind of topics. Probably more in Tony's work, they would be more inclined to do that sort of thing. But in an intergenerational space, from what I've experienced so far, we haven't really come across issues like that. I don't know, Mark, if you have in your space.
I think the other thing that, before Tony comments, is that we do have an advisory committee, and so we do have, because we work with psychologists and I'm a social worker, and we have that informed practice. We try and turn negative things into positive. For instance, people die. That's one of the things that we're very aware of. And when someone dies, and we talk about that with the students and we with a wellbeing officer, and turn that into a kind of a positive experience. And taboo, around talking about death is something taboo in the community. So you can turn these things into really positive events if they're done properly and if people are aware, because it is about how do you create safe spaces. And Tony, I know you do this all the time, so maybe you want to comment.
One of the things is what we try very hard to do is to ensure that any storyteller, no matter what their age, not what their profile is, they have complete agency over their story. So they choose what goes in the script. We don't sit people down in front of a video camera. We don't interview them. We don't edit that video afterwards. We talk to them about what makes a good story. We ask them to write the story that they want to tell, that only they can tell, and that they want to share. And so we work with them on that. We work with them and get them to think about the issues that may be around disclosure in their stories and how they will feel about it. One of the great things about digital storytelling approach is that no one has to have their face on camera. No one has to have their name on it. So it can be a very anonymized approach if people want to. But what we have found over the 2 decades we've been doing this is that we would say 98% of all storytellers, having spent 3 days of their hard-earned lives working their proverbials off to make a digital story that they are proud of, they want their name on that story. You try saying to an academic, you don't really need your name on that paper, do you? And won't bother referencing you properly. They don't fit. And so people will talk about, Kath Veselovsky talked about her dementia, her partner's dementia. Other people have told stories about their own dementia. People have stories about their incontinence, about their emphysema, about their COPD, about impending death, about motor neurone disease, about all these things. But actually, to a person, they tell these stories and they say, either, if it was a traumatic incident, I don't want this to happen to someone else. That's why I want to share this story. So people learn from my experience if it's a bad one. Or they say that they want it to be their experience to be acknowledged. They want there to be a testimonial to their lives, so that there is a witness to their lives, to quote the Richard Gere film with the dancing and J-Lo and things, to be a testament to someone's life. And I think that's one of the things that the stories can be. It allows people to give back something incredibly powerful and incredibly useful and incredibly educational in a way that other people, that they could not do. So their stories, which are part of their lives.
Yeah, look, that's really terrific, Tony and Zanti, because it is about bearing witness. And I think moving the private to the public arena is a very healing process. And I think we look at that. Maybe to finish up, because I know we're of time, a wonderful comment from Graziana Alessandrini. Congratulations to all of you. I found your work really interesting. And I think that this kind of initiative are what we need to be put on the public agenda, a better perspective on ageing and a major commitment on making better conditions for the elderly in terms of inclusion and mistreatment. This kind of program you implemented, is it a private initiative or is it something installed as part of the education in your community? And I think that's what we aim for. We certainly aim for this to be everywhere. And well said, Graciana. I think we do, you picked it really, that we do want these kind of things to spread, because it's not rocket science, is it, Zanti and Tony? And I hope we made that point, in that it's not rocket science, it's not hard. It's really unleashing normality, really, creating a village kind of spirit that we don't have anymore. And I think that's probably it. And some couple of final words from Zanti and Tony. We've got 1.5 minutes left. So I'm going to give Tony the last word, but Zanti, do you want to, anything that you want to sum up this work in a couple of words?
Yeah, look, I completely agree. I would love to see it embedded into, like I said, school curriculums and aged care practice, because it's incredibly powerful. It is not difficult to do, but the power of it is, there's no words to sort of describe what it can achieve. So over to you, Tony.
This is both a process and a product. The process, digital storytelling, is a powerful and reflective thing. The products, which people contribute as donations to social capital, are there to be used. So after you finish watching this talk, go to the Patient Voices website, watch some of the stories from elderly people, share them with other people, distribute, get out those memes, those activist memes of their experiences that elderly people have created. Spread the word, please. It's free. Use them.
Well, good on you on those words. Thank you so much to Carolina for helping us today, and to the conference, because it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to showcase our work and everybody else's work. And thank you everybody for watching and putting in some beautiful questions to us, and all the best and for the rest of the conference. And thank you very, very much. And thank you, all the best to everybody.